Freeze, right there! Officer Mark Dolan's command sliced through the cold November air, sharp as a razor. His shout echoed off the stone steps of the Baltimore County Courthouse, causing everyone from hurrying lawyers to court employees to stop and stare. Rookie Ben Carter, standing beside Dolan, jumped. Both officers were on guard duty at the main entrance, and Dolan, a 15-year veteran who prided himself on his instinct, an instinct that sniffed out trouble, was zeroed in on an older black woman. She wore a simple dark green wool coat that looked old and was clutching a worn leather briefcase. She had just set her foot on the first step when Dolan's shout froze her in place. "Did you hear me?" Dolan stepped forward, his large frame completely blocking the woman. He got right in her face, his voice a low, aggressive growl. "You're entering a restricted area. What's your business here? Here to cause trouble?" The woman looked up at him. She wasn't scared. She just looked calm. "Good morning, officer. I was just—" "Don't just me," Dolan snapped. He cut a glance at Carter, as if teaching a lesson. "See this? This is what we deal with every single day. Always pushing. You're in the wrong building, lady. The benefits office is down the street." He sneered, a sour, unpleasant sound. "Or are you here to protest?" Rage was building in him. Why wasn't she cowering? Her calm, to him, was the ultimate sign of defiance. "Officer," the woman said, her voice clear and measured, "I am Judge Evelyn Hayes, and I am late for work." But for a man with 15 years of crime-spotting experience like Dolan, that word judge coming from her wasn't just a lie. It was a blasphemy. It confirmed his instinct that she was a sophisticated troublemaker. Never, however, could he have imagined that the instinct he'd trusted for 15 years had just led him into a catastrophic trap. He had no idea that the woman he was publicly humiliating didn't just work in this building. She was the court. Dolan's face, already tight with suspicion, contorted into a mask of pure derision. He barked a single harsh laugh that turned heads 50 feet away. "A judge? You?" "Right." He looked over his shoulder at Carter, winking. "And I'm the mayor of Baltimore. You people, you'll say anything." He shook his head, enjoying the performance. He was the protector, the gatekeeper, the one who saw through the lies. His gaze returned to Evelyn, hard and cold. "You want to play this game? Fine. Let's see some ID that says judge." "Very well," Evelyn said. She sounded tired, not tired from the confrontation, but tired of this specific exhausting brand of ignorance. "I don't have time for this, officer. I have a 9 a.m. docket." She set her silver thermos down on the stone railing beside her. She then placed her old briefcase, the one her late husband, Robert, had given her. "For all the lives you're going to change, Evie," he'd said on the day she was first appointed on the ground, and knelt slightly to open the brass latches. "Hurry it up," Dolan snapped. "I haven't got all day to wait for you to find a fake library card." As Evelyn's gloved fingers searched inside the case, past her files and her judicial credential wallet, Dolan's impatience boiled over. He saw her digging, and his instinct told him she was hiding something, or stalling, or looking for a weapon. "What are you hiding in there? Stealing court documents?" Before she could even react, he lunged and grabbed the briefcase, yanking it from her grasp. "Officer, that is my private property," Evelyn cried out, her voice finally sharp with alarm. The sudden, violent tug-of-war was brief. Dolan ripped the bag away. The motion was so jarring it knocked over her thermos. Hot, dark roast coffee she'd brewed herself at home. A 30-year morning ritual splashed out, spilling onto the stone steps and splattering the toe of Dolan's polished black boot. Silence. A profound, terrible silence fell. Ben Carter visibly flinched. Dolan looked down at the small, dark splash on his boot. He looked up at Evelyn. His face was no longer mocking. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He had been disrespected. He had been assaulted. "Assaulting an officer," he said, his voice quiet and menacing. "That was an accident," Evelyn protested, rising to her feet. "You caused it by grabbing my—" Crack. The sound was sharp and sickening, a noise so loud it seemed to stop the wind. Dolan, in one swift, unthinking motion of pure brutality, backhanded her across the face. Evelyn's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. Her glasses flew from her face and clattered onto the stone, one lens popping out. A stunned, horrified silence descended upon the plaza. A few lawyers arriving nearby froze, their mouths open, not believing what they had just witnessed. Ben Carter flinched back, his face pale as death. "Jesus, Mark," he whispered, horrified. Evelyn slowly, deliberately straightened up. She didn't cry out or scream. She calmly raised a trembling, gloved hand to her cheek, where a red mark was already blooming into a dark, angry bruise. Her eyes, when they met Dolan's, were not filled with tears or fear. They were blazing with a cold, clear fire that he completely mistook for simple anger. It was the fire of pure, undiluted justice. Dolan, realizing he'd crossed a major line in front of multiple witnesses, did the only thing his training had taught him. He doubled down. He covered his own shock with more brutality, grabbing her arm. "You're done," he sneered, his voice dropping to a vicious growl. "Filthy animal. Put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for trespassing, assault on a police officer, and resisting." He shoved the 65-year-old woman against the cold stone wall, pinning her there. "Carter! Cuffs! Now!" Ben Carter was paralyzed. "Dolan, hold on, her glasses. She said, I said now, rookie," Dolan roared, his spittle flying. "Back up your partner." Reluctantly fumbling, Ben Carter pulled out his handcuffs. As he approached the woman he just saw his superior strike, Evelyn Hayes stared past them both. She wasn't looking at them. She was looking up, her gaze fixed on the words carved in the stone frieze above the entrance. Baltimore County Courthouse. Her courthouse. Dolan leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper, adding one final, cruel insult. "It's the week of Thanksgiving. Looks like you'll be eating your turkey through a straw, Grandma. You made a big mistake coming here today." Officer Dolan was right about one thing. He would be testifying, but he had no idea that the woman he was arresting wasn't just going to court, she was the court, and her hearing was about to become his. As Dolan shoves Evelyn toward the door, the main courthouse entrance opens. Bailiff Henderson, a large man who has served as Evelyn's personal bailiff for 20 years, steps out for his morning coffee. He sees his boss, his friend in handcuffs, a bruise on her face, being manhandled by Dolan. He freezes, his face a mask of confusion and horror. A holding cell is a small box of concrete and steel designed to make a person feel powerless. But as the heavy steel door slammed shut on Judge Hayes, it wasn't her spirit that was being caged. It was Officer Dolan's, and he was just about to forge the bars himself. The humiliation of the booking process was a study in methodical dehumanization. Evelyn was no longer a person. She was cargo being processed. Her mugshot was taken, the bright flash blinding her, capturing the angry purple bruise that was now spreading across her left cheek. She was fingerprinted, the cold, sticky ink a profound indignity. The booking sergeant, a man named O'Malley, who had nodded respectfully to Judge Hayes 1,000 times in the courthouse hallways, didn't even recognize her. He was looking at his screen, not at her. He saw the paperwork filed by Dolan. Jane Doe, black 60s. Assault on Leo. He sighed, bored. "Empty your pockets, ma'am. All of them." Her briefcase, the one from Robert, was slammed into a plastic evidence bin, its contents her life's work impounded. Her judicial ID, which had fallen to the ground during the arrest, was now buried in that bin, face down. Her thermos, the silver one she'd carried for a decade, was unceremoniously thrown in the trash. Officer Carter was tasked with the final indignity, escorting her from the booking desk to the courthouse holding cell. The walk was silent, a grim procession down a sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway. The only sound was their footsteps on the cracked linoleum. Carter was visibly shaking, his face pale and clammy. He refused to make eye contact, staring at the back of her head. Evelyn, walking with her head held high despite the chill of the basement, finally stopped, forcing him to stop. He nearly ran into her. She turned to face him, her gaze so steady and clear, it made him want to crawl out of his skin. "Ma'am," he started, his voice cracking. Officer Carter," she said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through his pathetic mumble. "What is your badge number?" He froze. This was not the question he expected. He didn't expect a plea or tears or anger. He expected nothing. "Ma'am," he stammered. "Your badge number," she repeated as if speaking to a slow child. "And your training officer's badge number. I'd like them, please." He nervously recited them. 4419 for Dolan, 6023 for himself. She nodded once, committing them to memory. "Thank you, officer. You are about to write a supplemental report on this incident." He flinched. "This will be the most important report you ever write. Make sure it is an honest one, son." He couldn't answer. He was choking on his own shame. He opened the holding cell door. The smell of sweat, fear, and unclean toilets hit them. Evelyn stepped inside without a word. The heavy steel door slammed shut, and the deadbolt echoed down the hall. Carter was left alone in the hallway, his hands shaking, the word "son" ringing in his ears. The cell was cold, a small concrete box that smelled of human despair. Evelyn pulled her simple wool coat tighter, but the chill was deeper than the November air. It was in the steel bench, in the concrete walls, in the very soul of the place. She sat on the hard bench, a world away from her high-back leather chair in her chambers upstairs. For a brief, human moment, she allowed herself to feel the sting, not just the throb on her cheek, but the sharp pain in her heart. She thought of her late husband, Robert. He had given her that briefcase, the one now sitting in an evidence bin. "Look at me now, Robert," she thought, a wave of bitter irony washing over her. 30 years on the bench, and here I am, a judge in her own jail. "You always said I needed to see the system from the other side, but I don't think this is what you meant." But her weary reflection was interrupted by another sound, a sound far more desperate than her own thoughts. It was the sound of quiet, terrified sobbing from the darkest corner of the cell. She looked over. A young woman, barely in her 20s, was huddled there, rocking back and forth, her knees pulled to her chest. This was Alicia. Evelyn's demeanor shifted instantly. The brief flicker of self-pity was extinguished, replaced by the calm, measured compassion that had defined her entire career. The victim was gone. The judge had returned. She moved slowly and sat on the bench a few feet from the girl. "What happened?" she asked, her voice gentle, almost grandmotherly, cutting through the girl's panic. Alicia looked up, her eyes wide and red with tears. They're gonna take my kids," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. She told Evelyn her story, a cascade of misfortune that was all too common in Evelyn's courtroom, but felt different from this side. An unpaid parking ticket from months ago. She'd missed the original court date because her youngest son had a high fever and she couldn't afford a babysitter. She was pulled over this morning on her way to drop him at daycare, and the old warrant popped up. I'm going to miss my shift at the diner," she cried, fresh tears spilling. "If I lose this job, I can't pay rent. They don't care. They just see us. They just lock us up." Evelyn listened patiently, not interrupting. When Alicia was finished, Evelyn nodded slowly. For the next hour, she didn't think about her own predicament. She gave Alicia precise, free, and invaluable legal advice. "When you go in there, you are not to plead guilty," Evelyn instructed, her voice steady and full of an authority that Alicia had never heard before. "You are to plead not guilty and request a public defender. You tell them you missed the original date because of a sick child. You ask to have the warrant recalled and to pay the original fine. Do not be afraid of the judge. Be clear, be firm. You have rights." Alicia looked at her, her sobs finally slowing. You sound like a lawyer." Evelyn managed a small, sad smile. "Something like that. I know the system." Meanwhile, in the cramped police satellite office on the courthouse's second floor, Officer Mark Dolan was holding court. He was pacing, animated, dictating his official report to a precinct clerk, but loud enough for the other officers in the room to hear. He was performing, painting himself as the hero. "Subject identified as Jane Doe, black, female, approximately 60, he boomed, became verbally abusive, using extreme profanity after being denied entry to a restricted area. Subject appeared unstable, possibly under the influence of narcotics." Ben Carter was sitting at the next desk, the blank screen of his computer monitor staring back at him. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't even type his own name. He was supposed to be writing his supplemental report. Dolan noticed the rookie's paralysis and sauntered over, leaning heavily on Carter's desk, invading his space. "What's the holdup, rookie?" "Subject was a sweet old lady and I cried," he whispered, his voice laced with venomous mockery. "No, sir," Carter stammered, his face pale. "Just trying to get the facts straight." "The facts are what I say they are," Dolan hissed, his performance voice gone, replaced by a low, dangerous threat. "I was assaulted. You saw it. My boot was covered in scalding coffee. She lunged at me. She was screaming like a banshee. I used minimal, necessary force to subdue an aggressive, non-compliant suspect." "Got it?" Carter's throat was dry. He could still see the judge's glasses flying off. He could still hear her calm, clear voice. She didn't lunge, Mark. You grabbed her bag, and she told us her name. She said she was—" Dolan slammed his heavy hand on the desk, making the monitor jump and Carter flinch. "Listen to me, kid," he snarled, his face inches from Carter's. "It's her word against two of ours. Who do you think the judge is going to believe? Us or another street bum? You back my play or you'll be writing parking tickets in the snow on Christmas Eve for the rest of your career. Do you understand me?" Carter looked down at the keyboard, his face flushed with a toxic mix of fear and shame. He thought of his desire to be a good cop, like the one who had saved his sister. This wasn't it. This was the opposite. But he was trapped. The blue wall was real, and he was on the wrong side of it. Yes, sir," he muttered, defeated. His fingers, trembling, began to type. "I observed the suspect become verbally aggressive." He was cementing the lie and his own fate in digital ink. The lie was now official, logged in the system, and irreversible. The holding cell door clanged open, the sound of metal on metal echoing down the concrete hall. A guard barked, "Hayes, you're up! Arraignment! Courtroom 3B!" Evelyn stood, smoothed her coat, and nodded to Alicia. "Remember what I said?" Ortananamiher. She walked out, her head held high, ready for the next act of this farce. She was violent, erratic, and a clear danger. Officer Dolan's voice filled the courtroom, each word a perfectly crafted lie. He was on the witness stand, his hand having just left the Bible, his face a mask of solemn, heroic duty. He was performing for Judge Harrison, and the temporary judge was buying every word, nodding grimly from the bench. "Your Honor," Dolan continued, his voice booming with false sincerity. "In my 15 years, I've seen this pattern. I approached the suspect, the defendant, using standard de-escalation. She immediately became agitated, screaming profanities at the top of her lungs, calling me a pig, a racist, you name it. Evelyn Hayes sat at the defendant's table, her hands cuffed behind her back. The angry purple bruise on her cheek throbbed, a silent testament to Dolan's de-escalation. "Hot good to him." She watched him, her expression unreadable, a picture of calm that only seemed to infuriate Dolan more. "She was completely unhinged," Dolan said, shaking his head as if in sorrow. "She even started screaming that she was a judge." He scoffed, and a few people in the gallery, followers of Harrison's lead, chuckled. "When I tried to calm her, to get her to just move along, she attacked me. She threw her hot coffee all over my uniform and then lunged, striking me in the chest." He pointed to his own chest, a pantomime of victimhood. The young prosecutor, eager to score a point, leaned forward. "Officer Dolan, in your extensive experience, is this behavior common?" Dolan leaned into the microphone, his eyes finding Evelyn's. This was his moment. "All the time, ma'am. Unfortunately, there's a pattern with these people." He let the racist implication hang in the air, a poisonous cloud. "They don't respect authority. They think they're entitled. They provoke you, they push you, and the second you react to defend yourself, they scream brutality to get a payday." He pointed a finger directly at Evelyn Hayes. "She's a textbook example, a danger to herself and the public. Truly, no remorse." The air in the courtroom was thick with a shared, manufactured outrage. Judge Harrison, the temporary judge, was nodding grimly from the bench, his face a mask of agreement. He had bought every single word of Dolan's performance. "Thank you, officer," Harrison said, his voice dripping with sympathy. "A truly disturbing encounter. It takes a brave man to face that kind of hatred every day, especially during the Thanksgiving week. Your professionalism is commended." Evelyn Hayes noted the word professionalism, the same word Harrison had used to describe her, Judge Hayes, at a bar association dinner just last year. The irony was so bitter it tasted like acid. Harrison, she knew, was a weak man, a procedural judge who trusted a uniform above all else. And Dolan was exploiting that weakness perfectly. The prosecutor, sensing an easy win, continued. "Your Honor, to affirm the testimony, the state calls Officer Ben Carter." This was the moment. Ben Carter looked like he was walking to his own execution. He was pale, almost green, and visibly sweating under the fluorescent lights. He took the stand, his hand trembling as he was sworn in. He refused, absolutely refused, to look at Evelyn. He stared at a spot on the wall just above her head, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. "Officer Carter," the prosecutor asked, his voice gentle, as if speaking to a victim, "did you witness the events on the steps this morning?" Carter swallowed. The sound was audible in the silent room. "Yes, ma'am, I did." "And did you witness the defendant, Ms. Hayes, become verbally abusive and aggressive toward Officer Dolan?" Carter's eyes darted involuntarily to Dolan, who was sitting in the front row staring at him. It wasn't a look of support. It was a threat. "Back my play." Carter remembered the threat to his career, the shame, the fear. His eyes then, against his own will, found Evelyn's. He saw the dark, ugly bruise on her cheek. And worse, he saw her eyes. They weren't angry. They were disappointed. That look was 1,000 times worse than anger. It was the look of his old mentor, Officer Miller, finding out he was a coward. "Officer Carter," Judge Harrison prompted, his voice impatient. Ben Carter broke. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, then opened them. The truth died on his lips. He turned his gaze to his lap. "Yes," he whispered, his voice cracking. I saw her. She was very aggressive, yelling." "And did you see her strike Officer Dolan?" This was the final nail. Carter's stomach churned. He could still hear the slap of Dolan's hand on her face. It happened fast," he mumbled, a pathetic attempt at hedging. "But yes, I did." The lie was out. It hung in the air, a putrid, tangible thing. Dolan let out a small, satisfied breath. The lie was complete, sealed by 2 officers, and now accepted as fact. Judge Harrison nodded, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. He looked down at the 2 hero officers, and then he turned his full, unmitigated glare on Evelyn. "Thank you, officers. You may step down." He shuffled the papers in front of him, papers that were, in fact, Dolan's fabricated report. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "these are incredibly serious charges. Assaulting an officer of the law on courthouse property, and the week of Thanksgiving, no less. It is an affront to this entire city, to the very concept of order." He picked up Dolan's report, reading from it as if it were gospel. "The report indicates you are unstable, delusional, claiming to be a judge, of all things, and," he added, "you appear to have no community ties, no fixed address listed." "That's because they never asked me," Evelyn said, but Harrison waved her quiet words away. "I am setting bail at $100, cash." A collective, shocked gasp filled the courtroom. Alicia, the young woman from the cell, let out a small, strangled cry. $100,000, it was a death sentence. It meant Evelyn would be sent to the city detention center, lost in the system for months before she ever saw a trial. It was the final, crushing act of injustice. "Furthermore," Harrison continued, eager to move on, "I am scheduling your hearing for, Your Honor." Evelyn's voice cut through the room. It wasn't loud. It was clear, resonant, and dripped with an authority that made everyone, including Judge Harrison, pause. "Excuse me, Ms. Hayes," Harrison said, annoyed at the interruption. "You do not speak unless spoken to." "My apologies, Judge Harrison," Evelyn said, standing slowly. The chains on her handcuffs rattled, a soft, cold sound. But there seems to be a significant misunderstanding in this courtroom. Oh, there's no misunderstanding at all, Harrison huffed. The testimony was quite clear. On the contrary, Evelyn said, her voice gaining strength, the testimony was perjury, and I can prove it. Dolan, sitting in the front row, scoffed. She's delusional, he whispered loudly to Carter. Your Honor, Evelyn continued, her eyes locked on Harrison, if you would be so kind as to check the name of the presiding judge you are currently filling in for, the judge who is supposed to be running this entire courthouse, the judge who is currently on personal leave? Harrison blinked, confused by the non sequitur. I don't see what that has to. The roster says Judge Hayes is out this week. She is, Evelyn said, her eyes blazing. Or rather, she was. She took a step forward, as far as the defendant's box allowed. Your Honor, you are sitting in my chair. My name is Judge Evelyn Hayes. This is my courthouse. That is my docket you are managing. And that man, she pointed directly at a suddenly very pale Officer Dolan, just assaulted a federal judge on her own property. And then, her voice dropped, cold as the morning air, he lied about it, under oath, in my courtroom. For a long moment, the only sound in courtroom 3B was the frantic ticking of the wall clock, each second measuring the complete collapse of Officer Dolan's world. The hunter had just learned his prey was, in fact, the lion. The stunned silence was absolute. Judge Harrison, the man who had been so arrogant and dismissive just moments before, was fumbling with his papers, his face a mottled, terrified red and white. Judge Hayes? Evelyn, my God, I didn't recognize the paperwork, the bruise. Clearly, Evelyn said, her voice cutting through his panicked sputtering, you were too busy commending Officer Dolan for his professionalism. The young prosecutor, his face as pale as a sheet, jumped to his feet. Your Honor, Judge Hayes, I mean, this is highly irregular. We must recess. He was looking for any way to stop this, to get out of the room. What you need to do, counselor, Evelyn said, her voice commanding, is sit down, all of you. The prosecutor sat as if his legs had been cut out from under him. Officer Dolan was frozen in his seat, his smugness evaporating, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He was staring at Evelyn, not as a vagrant, but as the woman he now horribly recognized from the pictures in the lobby. Ben Carter looked like he was going to be physically sick. Evelyn turned her head, ignoring the judge, the prosecutor, and her assailants. She looked directly at the bailiff's station in the back of the room. Bailiff Henderson, the large man who had been standing by the door, frozen in horror since he recognized her, snapped to attention. His face was a mask of shame and a dawning, righteous fury. Yes, Your Honor. Bailiff, you have known me for 23 years, she stated. It was not a question. Yes, Your Honor, I have. You served me my coffee every morning for the first 10 of those years. You know the thermos I carry. You know the coat I wear. Yes, Your Honor. Then you know, she said, her voice soft but carrying to every corner, that these handcuffs are interfering with my ability to preside. Bailiff Henderson began marching down the center aisle. He was a large man, and his heavy, purposeful footsteps on the tile floor were the only sound in the stunned courtroom. Each step was a beat, like a drum marking an execution. Officer Dolan, seeing his entire world collapsing, his instinct and his experience turning to ash, tried one last desperate grasp for control. He stood up, his voice shaking but loud, appealing to the weakest man in the room. Your Honor, Judge Harrison, this is irregular. She is a suspect. She is under arrest. She assaulted me. You can't let her. Quiet! Henderson's roar was so loud it made Dolan physically flinch. The bailiff, a man normally gentle and quiet, was now radiating a pure, cold fury. He didn't even look at Judge Harrison. He walked directly to Officer Dolan, his hand resting not on his cuffs, but on his holstered sidearm, a clear and present warning. He got into Dolan's personal space, forcing the larger officer to take a step back. You will be silent, sir, he spat, while Judge Hayes is speaking. Dolan, for the first time in his 15-year career, was completely, utterly cowed. He shrank back, his face white. Henderson, in a profound gesture of contempt, turned his back on Dolan. He marched the final few feet to the defendant's box where Evelyn stood waiting. His hands were trembling, not with fear, but with a profound, bone-deep rage. "Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with shame. I, I saw, I didn't, It's all right, Henderson," Evelyn said, her voice calm. "For now, just the cuffs." He pulled out his own key, fumbling for a moment because of his anger. He put the key in the lock. The click, click, click of the handcuffs opening echoed through the silent room. It was the loudest sound anyone had ever heard. It was the sound of a chain breaking, the sound of a verdict being reversed, the sound of power shifting in an instant. Evelyn Hayes rubbed her wrists, the red, angry marks stark against her skin. She then stepped out of the defendant's box. The entire courtroom, the other prisoners, the lawyers the gallery watched, mesmerized as she did. She walked not to the back of the room, but straight toward the bench. Judge Harrison, mortified and realizing his career was likely over, scrambled to get out of the high-backed leather chair. He was grabbing his papers, his water cup, anything just to get away. "Evelyn, Your Honor, I am so sorry. The docket." "You are excused, Charles," Evelyn said quietly, stopping him. Her voice was not angry, just final. He was dismissed, not forgiven. Harrison, avoiding eye contact with everyone, practically fled through the private side door, his robes billowing behind him like a man running from a fire. Evelyn Hayes now stood in the center of the well, the rightful owner of the room, still in her disheveled wool coat, her bruised cheek on full display. The entire room, prosecutor, officers, gallery, was her prisoner. "Court is in recess for 15 minutes, she announced, her voice ringing with its natural authority. "All other matters on this docket are postponed." She looked at the prosecutor. "You will remain." She then turned her gaze to the two officers who were standing like statues of terror. "And you," she said, her voice dropping, "will not leave this room. You are both material witnesses and, as of this moment, subjects of a federal investigation. Bailiff Henderson, ensure they do not communicate or leave this courtroom. Confiscate their phones." "Yes, Your Honor," Henderson said, his relief at having a clear, righteous order palpable. He marched to Dolan and Carter and held out his hand. "Phones." Carter handed his over immediately. Dolan hesitated, his hand shaking, and Henderson snatched it from his grasp. Evelyn looked at the court stenographer, a woman who had been typing frantically, her fingers flying. "Have you captured all of Officer Dolan's testimony under oath?" The stenographer nodded, her eyes wide. "Yes, Judge. Every single word." "Good," Evelyn said. She then walked, not to the private chamber door, but down the main aisle, past the stunned gallery and out the public doors she had been dragged in through. The 15 minutes that followed were the most agonizing of Dolan's life. He and Carter stood in opposite corners, guarded by a furious Henderson. At exactly 15 minutes, the courtroom doors swung open, but not the public doors. The private chamber door behind the bench opened. Judge Evelyn Hayes walked out. She was still wearing her simple wool coat and knitted sweater, but over them, she had put on her black judicial robe. The contrast was stunning. The bruised, abused citizen, now cloaked in the full, undeniable authority of the United States government. She was holding her ceremonial gavel. She walked to the bench. She took her seat. She looked down at Dolan, who looked like he was about to be sick. "Court is back in session," Judge Hayes said, her voice now amplified by the microphone. "Before we proceed to the charges of perjury and contempt, I believe the court is owed some clarity. Officer Dolan testified as to his version of events. Now let's see what the truth looks like." She nodded to Henderson. "Bailiff, please play the footage from security camera 7, the main entrance. On all monitors, please." A man's testimony is made of words which can be twisted. A camera's recording is made of light, which cannot. Officer Dolan was about to be burned by the light. The large monitors in the courtroom, usually reserved for video arraignments and evidence displays, flickered on. The entire room was now packed. Word had spread through the courthouse like wildfire, and clerks, lawyers, and even other off-duty officers had quietly filed into the back, standing along the walls, watching what was becoming the most shocking hearing in the building's history. Alicia, the young woman from the holding cell, was sitting in the front row, brought in by Henderson on the judge's orders. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the woman she knew as Evelyn. The image that appeared on the screen was high angle, black and white, but crystal clear. It showed the courthouse steps, the timestamp reading 8:32 a.m. The court will now review the unedited footage from the main entrance. Security camera 7. Judge Hayes's voice boomed from the speakers, calm and procedural. Please, roll the footage. The courtroom watched in absolute spellbound silence. They saw Evelyn, in her simple coat, walk up. They saw Dolan step directly into her path. The video was silent, so it looked like a strange, aggressive pantomime. They saw Evelyn try to step around him. They saw her set down her thermos and calmly reach for her bag. They saw Dolan, larger and more menacing from this angle, grab the briefcase from her. They saw the thermos tip over. Pause the footage, Evelyn commanded. The image froze on Dolan, his hand on her bag, and the dark splash of coffee beginning at his feet. Officer Dolan, she said, her voice amplified by the microphone. You testified, under oath, not 20 minutes ago, that I threw my coffee on you and lunged at you. Does this footage support that? Dolan was mute. His union lawyer, who had been hastily summoned and was now sitting beside him, was whispering frantically in his ear. But Dolan couldn't hear him. He was staring at the screen, his face ashen. It's not. The angle seems quite clear, Mr. Dolan, Evelyn said, her voice cold as steel. Resume footage. They all watched. They saw Dolan's hand. They saw the backhand, the slap. A collective, horrified gasp filled the packed courtroom. Several lawyers in the back, hardened to the world, visibly recoiled. Ben Carter let out a choked sob and doubled over, as if punched. Alicia, in the front row, put both hands over her mouth, her eyes streaming. Pause, Evelyn said again. Her voice was ice. You testified, Officer Dolan, that you used minimal necessary force to subdue a violent suspect. Is this minimal force? Is this the professionalism Judge Harrison commended you for? Dolan stared at the screen, at his own hand frozen in the act of violence. He had no words. He was utterly, completely, and irrevocably undone. The video is damning, Mr. Dolan, Judge Hayes continued, her voice echoing in the tomb-quiet courtroom. But it lacks one thing. It lacks the why. It lacks the motive. You see, the high-angle security camera doesn't have audio. She turned her gaze from the ruined Dolan to the shaking rookie, Ben Carter. But your rookie, his body cam does. Carter's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a new, fresh terror. Dolan had told him his own camera was malfunctioning, off. He had forgotten in his panic about Carter's. Your Honor, Carter whispered, a sound of pure dread. Bailiff, Evelyn said, ignoring Carter's plea. The prosecution, the real one, who I can assure you is on their way, has just recovered the audio from Officer Ben Carter's body-worn camera, which he thankfully activated, as per protocol. Please play the audio. Sync it with the video footage, if you can. The audio crackled to life, a sudden, jarring sound. The first thing the packed courtroom heard was Officer Dolan's voice, clear as day, overlaid on the video of Evelyn calmly walking up. Audio? Animals. The city's full of them. A ripple of shock went through the gallery. Audio. Look, I don't know what shelter you're coming from, but the soup kitchen is 3 blocks that way. Audio. You people are always claiming to be something you're not. Audio. A judge? You? Right. And I'm the mayor. Every lie Dolan had told on the stand, every racist assumption he had made, was now echoing through his courtroom, spoken in his own voice. The courtroom heard Evelyn's calm, steady voice. They heard her identify herself clearly. I am Judge Evelyn Hayes. They heard Dolan laugh at her. And then, the audio captured the moment of the assault. They heard the scuffle as Dolan grabbed the bag. They heard Evelyn's sharp cry of, "That was an accident." And then they heard it, the sound of the slap. A sickening, wet thwack that made people in the gallery physically cringe. It was followed by Dolan's own voice, snarling, full of venom. "Filthy animal, put your hands behind your back." The audio stopped. The courtroom was tomb quiet. Dolan had shrunk, collapsed into his chair, a broken, exposed man. The union lawyer was sitting back, his arms crossed, his face grim. He knew this was unwinnable. The truth was out, and it was uglier than anyone could have imagined. Evelyn Hayes looked down from the bench, her face a mask of judicial calm, but her eyes held the full weight of the evidence. "Officer Dolan, you have desecrated this courthouse. You have dishonored your badge, and you have committed perjury on this stand." Her voice was not raised. It was cold, precise, and absolute. "You testified I was screaming profanities. The court has just heard that the only person screaming, the only person using profane and abusive language, was you. You testified I claimed to be a judge as part of a delusion. The court has just heard me clearly identify myself, which you chose to mock. You testified I was a danger. The court has seen and heard who the real danger is." Dolan finally broke. The 15 years of arrogance, the instincts, the blue wall, it all shattered, revealing the pathetic, frightened man underneath. "It wasn't, I mean," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "You don't understand the pressure. What we deal with, they all lie. Everyone who comes in here lies to us." "And so you became the biggest liar of all?" Evelyn asked, her voice soft now, which was somehow more terrifying. She let the question hang in the air, a damning epitaph for his career. Then her voice returned to its formal, judicial tone. "Bailiff Henderson." "Yes, Your Honor," Henderson said, stepping forward. "Place Mr. Mark Dolan under arrest. The charges are perjury, assault on a judicial officer, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. He is in contempt of this court. Get him out of my sight." Henderson, with a grim satisfaction that was visible to everyone, moved toward Dolan. Dolan, who had put so many people in cuffs, seemed to have forgotten how they worked. He was a sobbing, broken mess. "No, please. I have a family. It was a mistake." "So did I, officer," Evelyn said, her voice quiet. "And so did she," she added, gesturing to Alicia in the front row. Henderson pulled Dolan's hands behind his back the same way Dolan had done to Evelyn just hours before and cuffed him. The sound of the ratchet was loud and final. As Dolan was being led out, a ruined man, Evelyn turned her gaze to the last man, the one still standing, shaking, in the well of the court. Officer Carter. Ben Carter stood, his whole body shaking, tears streaming down his face. Your Honor, I, he couldn't speak. "Officer Carter," Judge Hayes said, her voice measured, "you also swore an oath. You also lied to this court. Before I pass sentence on Mr. Dolan's partner, this court must know. Why should I not have you arrested as well?" All eyes in the packed courtroom turned to Ben Carter. He was standing alone in the well, a 23-year-old kid in a police uniform, abandoned by his partner, his entire future hanging by a thread on Judge Hayes' single terrible question. "Why should I not have you arrested as well?" "You should," Carter choked out, the words tearing from his throat in a torrent of shame. "You should. I have no excuse, Your Honor." He was sobbing now, openly, not the quiet, terrified tears from before, but the ragged, heaving sobs of a man completely broken. "I was scared. He's my training officer. He said I'd be writing parking tickets for the rest of my life. He said it was us against them, that it was the blue wall. He's a 15-year veteran. He stopped, taking a ragged, shuddering breath, and seemed to find a tiny, final core of strength. "No," he said, shaking his head, looking up at her for the first time. "No, that's an excuse," that's what he would say. "The truth is, I became a cop because..." He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve, a child's gesture. "Because when I was 10 years old, our apartment building burned down. It was winter. We lost everything. And a black cop, Officer Miller, he pulled my little sister out of a window. He gave me his coat. He sat with me all night, long after his shift was over, and just talked to me. He made me feel safe. He was looking directly at Evelyn now, the tears streaming down his face, but his voice steady. I wanted to be him. I wanted to be the man who runs into the fire. But today I stood and watched it burn. I didn't just lie, Your Honor. I betrayed him. I betrayed why I'm here. I am so sorry, not just for the lie, but for not stopping him, for just standing there. He finally dropped his gaze, his confession complete. You should arrest me. The courtroom was silent, moved by the raw, agonizing honesty of his confession. Judge Evelyn Hayes watched him for a long, quiet moment. The entire courtroom, the entire city seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for her judgment. She nodded slowly. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice measured, your confession does not excuse your perjury, but it does explain it. You were given a choice between what was right and what was easy. You chose poorly. She straightened a stack of papers on the bench, her bench. But first, she said, her voice hardening as she addressed the court record, on the matter of Officer Mark Dolan, let the record show that Mark Dolan, having committed felony assault on a judicial officer and blatant perjury in this very courtroom, is found in contempt. He is remanded to federal custody without bail. Her voice was a hammer, each word a nail in the coffin of Dolan's career. I am sending a full transcript of this hearing, including the video and audio evidence, to the U.S. Attorney General's office, the governor, and the mayor of Baltimore. His career in law enforcement is over. His pension is forfeited. And perhaps most importantly, she said, her voice rising slightly, the 432 cases he has testified on over the last 5 years, as of this moment, they are all under immediate review. He has poisoned the well of justice. Now he will drink from it. She had delivered justice. Now she turned to the trembling man standing before her. She had delivered justice. Now it was time for mercy. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice softening just a fraction, I believe your remorse, but I do not believe you have paid your debt. Your lie cannot go unpunished. I am deferring your perjury charge, she said. Carter's knees visibly buckled in relief. It will be held in abeyance, conditional on your complete and total cooperation with the U.S. Attorney's Office against Mr. Dolan. However, you are suspended from the police force, unpaid for 6 months. Carter nodded, relief flooding his face. Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I'm not finished, she said, and you will serve 1,000 hours of community service. 1,000 hours, Evelyn continued, her voice echoing in the profound silence. Officer Dolan, the man you chose to follow, seemed to believe that the people who need help in this city are animals. He seemed to believe that the places that offer warmth and food, like a soup kitchen, are a punchline. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Carter's. So your 1,000 hours will be served at the Charles Street Soup Kitchen and the Baltimore Shelter for Women and Children. You will start tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. sharp. You will serve meals, you will clean floors, and you will scrub toilets. She paused, letting the sentence land. You will spend the next 6 months looking every single person you serve in the eye. You will learn, Mr. Carter, what it means to serve the public, not just police them. You will learn what Officer Miller knew in his bones, that your job is not to be a wall, but to be a shelter. Carter was nodding, tears of pure, unadulterated gratitude now streaming down his face. Yes, Your Honor. Yes. Thank you. Do not thank me, Evelyn said, her voice firm but not unkind. Thank Officer Miller. Go and be him. She then looked out at the entire courtroom, her gaze landing for a moment on Alicia, who was crying too, but for the first time that day smiling. This week, Evelyn said to the room, is Thanksgiving, a time to be grateful. But it is also a time for humility. This courthouse, this system, has been reminded of that today. We are here to serve the people, all the people, not to judge them by their coats, their color, or their station, but by their actions. She lifted her gavel, the same one she had held as a defendant, the one her husband had given her, but now it was a symbol of restored order. Case dismissed. This court is adjourned. The final image is Evelyn Hayes walking off the bench, robe flowing. She passes Alicia in the gallery and gives her a small, knowing nod. Alicia whispers, "Thank you, Evelyn." Evelyn pauses, smiles, and says, "It's Judge Hayes, and you're welcome." That morning at the Baltimore County Courthouse became a quiet lesson, whispered about for years to come. It wasn't just the story of a prejudiced officer's downfall, but a profound reminder that justice can be found in the most unexpected places, through the one who seemed the most powerless. The story of Judge Evelyn Hayes etched into memory that true dignity doesn't lie in a powerful uniform or a worn-out coat, but in the fundamental respect we owe one another. And sometimes the final gavel of justice rests in the hands of the very person who was judged long before they ever had a chance to speak.